Discus have a reputation of being very difficult to raise. In fact, I want to show you how easy it is to keep a tank for a discus. A warning, they can be very easy to keep if you do it their way. But if you're just going to buy a discus and sort of toss it into your planted aquarium, it's going to be a very, very low return on your investment. Now, this is a 75-gallon tank with young discus. This strain is called Golden Leopard Intermediate. I'll explain that in a second. These fish all came from one single spawn from a breeder in New York, and they're roughly 17 months old. The larger fishes here are 5 inches long, and because they're discus, they're supposed to be round, so they're also 5 inches in diameter. They're likely the males. The smaller ones are 4 to 4.5 inches in diameter, and they're likely to be the females. Now, there are many discus strains, and the names can be very confusing. Any breeder can choose to name their discus however they want. This particular strain name, Golden Leopard Intermediate, is quite descriptive, although they're not all that way. The term leopard refers to the spotter pattern, which are red in color. The spots are red, and if you can look at carefully, some of the spots even form circles. Intermediate means that this strain contains 1 dose of the albino gene. Two doses of the gene will produce an albino fish, that is, a fish that cannot produce a black pigment. 1 dose results in a fish with simply less black patterns. And golden refers to the base color of the fish in its natural state. Now, there's Corydoras and Plecos in this tank, and I do feed them pellets. And then discus also nibbles on the pellets. The pellets do contain some artificial dyes. If I didn't feed them the pellets, the background color of this fish will be actually golden. You see that some fish are more golden than others, and their face is golden. But after eating the pellets, you can see that much of their body has a silverish black background. Now, this tank has no gravel or sand in the bottom because young discus are very sensitive to dirty water. The water was changed right before I shot this, then they were fed once, and you can see the amount of dirt and poop that accumulates after one feeding. Imagine if you were to feed these fish 3 or 4 times a day, and day in and day out, and how much dirt will actually accumulate in the tank and would usually not be seen because of the gravel or the sand. So sad to say, young discus will not grow. In fact, they will not really even survive in a tank with gravel or sand because of all the dirt buildup that's almost impossible to get out. But once they get to adult size, 5 or 6 inches, you can move them into a planted tank. But before then, it just doesn't work. Certainly not in my 30 years of keeping discus. Now, some people keep discus just to have pretty fish in a planted tank. Some of them do breeding. I actually raise my discus for show, for competition. So to maximize the size of the fish, I change 100% of the water in this tank every day. Now, this large water change is really not necessary, but then the fish will not grow quite as large. An adult discus should be at least 6 inches. When you see a tank for a discus, it's actually quite simple to see whether or not they're happy, they're healthy, they're doing well or not. The most obvious thing is that do the discus come to the front to look at you and look for food? Or quite often you see them, particularly in fish stores, either staring at the back or resolutely sitting at the corner, doing everything they can to avoid eye contact with you. So that's a stressed out fish, and I wouldn't recommend you buy it. Second one, very simply, is are the fins compressed or are they wide open? As you can see on this fish, the fins are wide open. You can see the full extent of the finnage. Okay. Finally, of course, discus have stress bars, and just like the name says, if the fish is stressed, then the bars become very dark and very thick. And you can see here that the stress bars in this fish are very, very faint, normally because some of them get picked on, and there are some fish in which the stress bars are actually completely missing. Well, quality of discus is, I think, in my opinion, and really in the opinion of many other people, among the most beautiful fish in the freshwater aquarium. They're easy to raise as long as you keep them in a clean tank and do lots of water changes. And they require very little by way of other expenses, but you have to do the water changes. As these fish approach maturity, and they're getting close, we will start to see the females start to clean cones and so forth. The females will reach maturity in about another month or so. The males are delayed. They may be 3 to 6 months from now before they actually reach maturity. And then, of course, everybody's hoping that their discus will pair off and spawn. Other than the size, it's actually rather difficult to tell which are the males and which are the females. The easiest way to do it is to simply let the fish tell you. They know who are the females and who are the males. Once they start to pair off, they will drive the other fish to the other side of the tank, and then you can move them into their own tank. Unfortunately, just like when they're young, it's very difficult, virtually impossible, to have them spawn in a community tank or even a planted tank. They can actually, well, they can lay eggs. I've seen discus pairs spawn in fish stores, but to be able to rescue the fry is essentially impossible unless they're in their own tank. And you can see that this particular tank has a sponge filter, a heater, and then a cone that they will use. And this pair, a classic pair of blue turquoise, you'll see they're in the front. They're waiting to be fed. In fact, a little annoyed that they don't see food in my hands. Their fins are completely spread open. You see how nice the top fins and the bottom fins are. And of course, the stress bars are faint. Here are some adult discus. Okay, so these are between 2 to 3 years old. They probably will stop. They have essentially stopped growing. But these discus are a good 7 inches, if not 7.5 inches, in length and in diameter. They've been raised with lots of fresh water. They've been in very clean tanks, and they've been fed high-protein food. The two on the right are what we call Penang eruption. Penang being the province in Malaysia where most of the best discus in the world are being bred today. And the eruption describes a leopard pattern, which is obviously an order of magnitude different. And the fish in the middle now, the one that's blocking everybody, the grandparents were green discus. The parents were tank raised, and this fish is, again, it's about 3.5 years old. This is what a classic green discus would look like. So if you're interested in raising discus, the Minnesota Aquarium Society has multiple members who can help you with these fish.